Good, good. We only have one or two only children here. I was an only child. It was the best time of my life for 10 years. And then my sister was born. Very good. That's life. So in biology, right, we understand that organisms, even in the same species, are very seldom the same, right? Very seldom do we have identical twins. I have two of the nicest puppies in the world, but one is big and the other one is small, both of them from the same litter, and the big one is take advantage of the small one until the small one bites him. So in any natural population, we always see this thing called variation. Anybody can tell me or tell me what they think variation means? What does variation mean? Anybody?
A change? Like in this context, be a change like in an organism?
A change in the organism, all right, all right. So a change in the organism. Anything else?
Differences in the organisms.
Very good, very good. Differences in the organism. What else? Anybody? So I like those answers. A change in the organism or differences in the organism. Right? So today, as everybody could probably realize, the topic that we're going to be looking at is variation. Right? Now we're not going into genetics just yet, right? We will firstly discuss variation and how variation affects the population and affects this thing that we call natural selection, and then we will go into more detail on cells and how this thing affects how variation applies to cellular. People still joining. Sorry, how variation applies to cellular activity, like mitosis, meiosis, and that kind of thing. Yes, Branch, you have a question? Branch, do you have a question? Sorry if I kind of rambling there, guys. People trying to join the class at the exact same time that I'm teaching, and it is kind of be flustering a little bit when people trying to join at the same time, but we live and we move. Branch, you have a question?
No, sir.
I seen your hand up. So take your hand down if you don't have a specific question. All right. So what is variation? So let's see what is variation. So everybody should be seeing this slide coming up. All right, so variation. No two living organisms are exactly alike, not even identical twins. Variation arises from a combination of genetic causes and environmental causes. The phenotype of an organism is determined by its genotype and influences its environment. We can deal with those with phenotype and genotype as we move on, right? But we just want to describe what this variation means. So quickly take that down. All right, so guys, new students, please, I may not specifically know where you guys are at in school or in your studying. So can you all please just let me know what is your where you're at in school? What was the last topic or the topic you did in school most recently? New students, we have Mutas Mutasim and Tamari. Guys, what was the last thing you all would have done, or even what are the topics that you all might have the most difficulty in, or want a little bit more focus on?
Hi. When it comes to like the cell splitting,
Okay,
like, I don't
okay.
know. Yeah, I don't know what it's called that. I need help
Guys,
with that.
yeah, mitosis and meiosis and that kind of thing.
Yes.
All right,
That's what I
all
need
right.
help with the most.
Anything else? Anything else that you want to especially focus on?
No.
All right. Branch, your mic cooking. I'm not hearing anything.
Yes, but I have nothing to really focus on, sir. Right.
Okay. All right. So it's just covering the syllabus. All right. Anyone still writing? Raise your hand, please. All right. Finish up. So as we taking this down, all right, and we going through this part of the topic, you all, I want to let you think about something. Why is variation good? Why is variation bad? What makes variation something that, that helps survival? What makes variation something that is bad for the survival of organisms? Anybody could tell me? Come on, guys. You all.
The variation it's about like life because some organisms will have immunity to certain diseases and sicknesses. Some, and then there would be some that wouldn't have it because of the genetics.
All right, good. That's a good answer. So let's think about it like this, right? Let's think about it like this. Let's say a disease passed through that is going to kill all the pretty people in the world. So all the pretty people in the world die. Right? For sure, I'm going to be dead. So all the good-looking people in the world die. So because there is variation in the environment, and some people might be good-looking, but others might not be so good-looking. Some people might not be so pretty. That means that even though the pretty people might have been selected for sexual reproduction, right? That means that because there is a change in the environment, meaning this disease came across, that the ugly people, or I'll say the not so pretty people, they are the ones that are going to survive. So it does not matter, or it matters less when changes in the environment happen, right? So we could use another example. So you all know Cavendish bananas, right? Everybody know the bananas that they buy in the grocery. So there is a fungus that affects the Cavendish banana, right? And it is causing it is destroying the banana. Many banana plantations are getting the virus. And so the Cavendish banana may not survive for very long into the future if they do not find a cure for that fungus, right? It is destroying the population. Now, the reason why it is detrimental for the population of bananas is because the bananas reproduce asexually, right? And asexual reproduction does not give any variation. It is the same, the same organism that is produced over and over and over. So we're gonna take a look at sexual and asexual reproduction, right? And how the type of organism they produce affects variation. All right. Sorry, guys. My slide just, I don't know where the slide going. Where the slide going? So let's take a look at this note here. So you all know what sexual and asexual reproduction is, students? Or you all want me to go through that? So there are two types of reproduction. Asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. All right, so let's look at them. So asexual reproduction involves only one parent and offspring are produced by mitosis. And as I said, we could deal with the cell division just now, right? So asexual reproduction only requires one parent. All offspring produced asexually from one parent are genetically identical and are collectively called a clone, right? Anybody here ever plant a banana before? Anybody here ever plant a banana tree or banana plant? Do you all know how bananas are planted?
Yes. No, sir.
Somebody say yes. Tell me how. Let me hear.
The suckers is coming from the side.
Very good. All right. But even if the suckers don't come out, this is a banana tree. All right. You can see it's a banana tree because I draw it like a banana tree with big leaves. So the banana tree, it branches out into its stems here. If you cut a piece of this stem, and I'm going to just put it in red. If you cut a piece of this here, right, and you put it into the ground, this banana is going to grow out into a full tree. So the banana trees are planted asexually. They do not need another sexual partner for that tree to grow. Does that make sense, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Is anyone confused? Raise your hand, please. So here's what. If only one organism is needed to make a whole, the next organism, then these two are equal. They will have the same genes. They will have the same genetic material. And that is why we call it what? A clone. Does that make sense, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Anybody confused? All right, good. So asexual reproduction is conservative because it conserves the characteristic of the parent. Certain plants, as well as fungi and unicellular organisms such as amoeba and bacteria, reproduce asexually. All right, so I want you all to quickly take this note down. Anybody have any questions? Anybody know other organisms apart from the ones that we listed here that reproduce asexually? Anybody know?
Yeast.
Very good. Yeast. Anything else?
Snails?
Snails is a good one. Snails sometimes, yeah, many times reproduce asexually, and that is actually one of the big reasons that the giant African snail is such a problem, because it doesn't really need many times a partner or a sexual partner to reproduce, right? They have the eggs that could just be released. When you all finish, take that note. I have a nice surprise for you. Take this note down quickly. Have you all ever seen bacteria or any cells under the microscope? Students, you all ever look at or seen anything like that?
No, sir.
All right. Anyone still writing? Raise your hand, please. All right, finish up quickly.
So when it's asked if we saw cells under the microscope, um, would like watching onions and stuff count? Because I see onion cells under the microscope before.
Yeah, well, I mean, that kind of boring, but yeah.
It is.
We can look at something a bit more interesting just now. Everybody finish, students?
Yes, sir.
Anyone still writing? Please raise your hand. All right, nobody's still writing. So let's take a look. Where is it? Yeah, let's take a look here. So everybody seeing this cell, right? So this what we see in here is an amoeba cell. We see in the amoeba cell all out to the ends of the picture as well, right? The amoeba cell is about to divide, is about to split, right? So let's see how it does this. So well, you see it starts cutting itself in half, right? I'm trying to fast forward. So over the time, you're all seeing it separated into two. So look at how it started. Eh? This is how it started. Right? It keeps splitting and moving. Right? And as we see, it will start separating into two different parts. Right? As we see here. And by the time we finish, the two parts will completely separate from each other. Right? This is an amoeba. So what has happened is that amoeba, so you see just there, it's trying to pull away. It's trying to pull away from the other amoeba cell. So look at it, it's just gonna pull away now. So the microscope is trying to focus, right? But it can't focus on the two things at the same time. So that's why the one in the back is a little bit more blurry, and the one in the front is more so you see trying to focus there. So the microscope has focused there, and we're seeing it's pulling away. Just one little piece is remaining, right? So this is asexual reproduction that happens, right? Where the two separate. Everybody see it? And so it took one organism, right? We started at one organism, and that organism split into two. Yeah? We look at our next one. This is a paramecium. So the paramecium is a little bit more why is that making noise on the computer? So the paramecium, right? So we see it splitting here. So it started off as this one cell. Another one cell splits into two cells by the time you reach here. All right, there's our next one.
Bacteria reproduce very simply and rapidly by doubling their...
So I'm building up to a point. Don't worry. I know it looking a little boring, but I'm building up to something. So we're seeing a protozoa that is reproducing as well here, right? And the protozoa is splitting the cell. All right, now check this out. Check this out. So we see how the asexual reproduction happens, right? Everybody on the same page where they're seeing the asexual reproduction happening, right? So let's see what happens when asexual reproduction happens very quickly. So I want everybody to pay attention. Look at these two cells here, right? And I'm gonna I had to put this in slow motion for you all to actually see it. So I put it in slow motion. Let's see how these cells gonna split. So we're seeing the cell splits into two. Right? So look at this. So we have one or two cells here. So we're seeing that splits into 4. Everybody seeing it? Now the 4 going to split into 8. Look at that. 8 going to split into 16. So we're seeing how fast this asexual reproduction could happen, where we start from one cell or two cells, and we are going to create many cells. Now look at it. I'm going to put it in normal speed. Let's watch this, right? Look how fast the asexual reproduction could happen. Everybody seeing that? That is one of the
Yes, sir.
advantages of asexual reproduction, that it could happen so quickly, right? Now, what we just saw is where's the word? A fast forward of it, but that is just to show how quickly it happens compared to sexual reproduction. So let's look at sexual reproduction now and look at what the differences might be. Is anyone confused or has any questions, students? Anyone confused or has any questions? Raise your hand, please. All right, nice. So everybody on the same page. Okay, good. So let's look at sexual reproduction. So as we see here, in humans, sex cells are the sperm in males, right? Which I draw a little picture of a sperm here with a head and a tail. And the egg or ovum in females, and I draw a picture of a little egg here, right? So the sex cells are the sperm in males and the egg in females. And let's look at what we have for sexual reproduction. So sexual reproduction involves two parents, right? Of course, we need two, a male and a female. So gametes or sex cells are produced in reproductive organs by meiosis. And we can deal with that a little later on, right? From next class, we can start to deal with that topic. A male and a female gamete fuse during fertilization to form a single parent called a zygote. So let's take a look at this. So we have here, right? We have a male, right? A set of male cells. And we have a set of female cells here, right? And so what happens is that this process of meiosis occurs to produce the sperm in the males, and the process of meiosis occurs in the females to produce the egg. Yeah? Everybody with me?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
So
sir.
some people, parents probably tell them about a story with a stork, and the stork just come and deliver the baby. Right? I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but when a male and a female love each other, you know, they have relations and the sperm meets the egg and it produces what we call the first cell called the zygote, right? So that first cell called the zygote, everybody was at one time or the other a zygote cell, just one cell, which is the fusion of between the male sperm and the female egg. And then that zygote will reproduce by mitosis, right, to produce the adult person, right? So you started off as a zygote and you reproduced by mitosis to make an adult. Remember just now when we saw how the cell divided? Remember how we saw how that cell divided just now, students? The blue cell. That is how the cell divided over and over and over until those cells came together and had something we call cell specialization. Each cell had a particular job to produce the adult. Is anyone confused? So here the zygote divides by mitosis to form an embryo and ultimately an adult. Offspring produced sexually receive genes from both parents. Therefore, they possess the characteristics of both parents. That is, well, let's pay attention. That is, they show what? Let's tie this into everything you learned so far today. That is, they show variation. Does that make sense, everyone? Students?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So, asexual reproduction does not show any variation. All the organisms come out the exact same, while sexual reproduction does show variation. The organisms will come out differently because they have two parents and they get genes from both of those parents. Is anyone confused? Anybody
No,
confused?
sir.
Raise your hand, please. No? All right, quickly take this down. Take down what you're seeing here. Go ahead, take down the note that you're seeing here.
Yes, sir.
All right, anyone still writing? Please raise your hand. No one's still writing. Everybody finished? Okay, good. So we have here a little table. In fact, should I give you all this table? Yeah, we can have this table. So A stands for advantage, D stands for disadvantage, right? So A is advantage, D is disadvantage. So you have a nice table here that shows us the differences between sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. So let's go through it a little bit, right? So asexual reproduction. Now remember, A is advantage, D is disadvantage, right? So asexual reproduction produces no variation among offspring. All are identical. So that means, here what that means. Firstly, if the parent is well adapted to its environment, all the offspring will be well adapted. And the chances of them all surviving will be high, right? So remember, we talked just now about the pretty people and the not so pretty people. All right, well, I don't know which category you fall in. I am one of the pretty people. So right now, because, you know, of this face, I'm well adapted to the environment, right? Watch me so. You married me? You can't go back on that now. Right, sorry. So I am well adapted to the environment, right? And so with the bananas reproduce quickly, right? Let me think about things that reproduce asexually as well. Things like shadow benny, they reproduce quickly. They grow in a variety of environments and soils. We see them all over the place, right? They don't have much competition. Let's look at something else, the giant African snail. They reproduce asexually as well. And in the Caribbean, they don't have a predator. So which means that the chances of them surviving is high. The chances of them all surviving is high. And this is why we have the epidemic with the giant African snail that we have, because they are able to reproduce asexually and take over. Does that make sense, students?
Yes, sir.
Sir.
Right. So our next thing, so this is our advantage, right? Good. Now, if the environmental conditions change adversely, all the offspring will be adversely affected. So the same thing like the banana. We have the fungus that affects the banana now. If the banana, if we were not working for a cure for the bananas would die off because the fungus would affect all of them and kill them. Anybody see what's the name of the show, boy? Stace, what's the name of the show with the fungus? Turning people to zombies. You all know that show? The one with the fungus turning people to zombies.
Last of Us.
Last of Us, right? It came from the the game, right? So when the fungus started affecting the humans, all of them got taken over, right? Because the conditions had changed, right? So all the humans got affected because the conditions changed. Does that make sense? Anybody confused or has any questions? So this is going to reduce the chances of survival of all the offspring. Right? Next one, and this of course is a disadvantage, D, right? It does not enable the species to change and adapt to its changing environmental conditions. So because all the organisms comes out the same, right? Because all the organisms, remember we looked at the blue bacteria just now, and all the organisms came the same as the first one. There is no real way for those organisms to change and adapt if the environment changes. So the organism must stay the same way until it dies out, or it mutates, or it may find some way to reproduce sexually. Does that make sense, everyone? Anybody confused? So let's look again. Last one, the process is rapid. This is the thing about asexual reproduction. As we saw with our bacteria just now, the process happens rapidly because it does not need to find a mate. It does not involve finding a mate, producing gametes, the fertilization, the development of the embryo, all these things. The thing about it, though, is that it results in a rapid increase in the numbers of organisms in the population. And this allows them to outcompete and take over the resources in the environment. Does that make sense? All right, so I'll just write that here. This allows them to outcompete all other organisms and take over the environment. So everybody have a better understanding of what we're trying to talk about when we talk about variation, students?
Yes, sir.
All right, so it's in black, so you'll be able to read it. Nice. So now let's look at sexual reproduction, right? Let's look at sexual reproduction and how that, what is the advantages and disadvantages of sexual reproduction, and the variation that it gives. Everybody ready? So we look in here, sexual reproduction. All right, so sexual reproduction produces variation among offspring, which means no two organisms are alike. No two organisms are identical, right? So what does this mean? So let's see what this means. So the first thing is that some offspring may be better adapted to their environment than the parents, right? So others may not be as well, others may not be as well adapted. So consequently, not all have an equal chance of survival. So this is the disadvantage. So with any environment, some organisms die because they may not be well adapted, whereas some organisms thrive and do very well because they may be much more well adapted. Right? There was a study years and years and years ago. I think it was like 30 years ago, where they compared the amount of children that tall males produce compared to short males. And they saw that tall males had a much higher chance of having 3 or more children than shorter males, who on average would only have 1 child, right? And of course, that is the reason why is because in nature, the organism that seems to be more robust or taller, right, would be the organism that would be selected for. So you always see the bigger lions, the bigger hippopotamus, the bigger elephant, right? And so So the organism that is better adapted usually will be the bigger one. And well, same thing in humans, right? People look at, remember, I don't know if long time they used to say tall, dark, and handsome, right? Of which I am all three. So that is where we might see this situation where the shorter people, right? Even though I was very short when I was primary, so I was the second shortest person in school. And then I had a growth spurt. So you have hope, don't worry. So the shorter people have a much lower instance of having offspring. Stop fooling people. I say the shorter males, not the shorter females. No, because it's 4'10" and make a difference. Yeah, so the shorter people have a lower instance of producing offspring. All right, let's go next one. So the environmental conditions change. Sorry, if the environmental conditions change, some offspring may be better adapted to the new conditions, which increases the survival of some offspring. So let me look at this example again, right? Short people and tall people. Let's say there was a disease that passed through, right? That affected people's foot bones, right? So the people who are taller have much more mass in their feet. So if their feet bones become weaker, right? They have a lot more mass in their body. So if the feet bones become weaker, it would be difficult for them to stand up. So over time, they will die off, right? So that might mean that the people who are shorter will be selected for. They will now be the ones with an advantage. Because why? Because the environmental conditions have changed. Does that make sense, students?
Yes.
That makes sense, right? So once environmental conditions change, sexual reproduction has variation in it to allow some organisms to be better adapted to the conditions, right? So you have two organisms here, right? A mommy and a daddy. So the mommy and the daddy are going to produce offspring, right? Look, mother and child here. You bringing him? Yes. All right. All right. This is my father. You want to teach some chemistry, some biology? Huh? Right. So, teach some biology. So your mommy and your daddy, all right, sushi. I'm gonna fix it. Right. So, as we're seeing here, we have two organisms here, and they come in together to produce some offspring. Right? So they're going to make some offspring here. All right, so we have a few different offspring. So I'm going to use different colors. Right? We have one red, one blue. Right? We have one green. One lilac. And one black. And so now we see in these different colors of spring. So because we have different colors, any environmental condition that passes through, one of them would be able to survive. Let's say there's very hot sun, right? The sun becomes very hot. Well, the dark colored ones will die off, but the light colored one might survive. Yeah? Does that make sense, everyone? Does that make sense, Sushi? So any environmental condition pass, because we have variation in the organism, variation in the population, because of sexual reproduction, we will have many different opportunities for any one of those to survive. Last one. It enables the species to change and adapt to differing environmental conditions. So let's take a look here. So the mom and the dad both came out blue, right? And they both had the chance for, and they made different colors of spring. Everybody's seeing that because sexual reproduction allowed for the variation to happen. So let's say let's say a disease passed through that liked colors. So all of the colors died off. So now we only left with what? We only left with the black offspring. Everybody seeing that? We only left with this black offspring. Students, everybody seeing that?
Yes, sir.
So this black offspring now gonna find another black mate, and their offspring, they might have what, 1, 2 black offspring, and maybe a few blue ones or a few red ones or whatever the case might be, right? But the environment has selected for the black offspring, right? The environment has selected for the black offspring. So what does that mean? That means that the blue ones might be the ones to die off, right? The blue ones might be the ones to die off, and then eventually the population the population of that species might be more black organisms than anything else. Does that make sense, students? So what has happened here is we started with blue, right? We started with blue, but the environment has changed and selected for the black organisms because the sexual reproduction allowed for that variation. Does that make sense, students?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Is anyone confused? Sushi, are you confused? This is Papa. Say hi. Say hi, class. Hi, class.
Hi, class.
Hi, class. Now think about it, right? Let's say we had an organism that was reproducing asexually, and it started off with 2 blue organisms or 1 blue organism, and the environment changed that does where the disease passed through that does not like colors. When this organism produced blue offspring, what's going to happen to it? It could only produce blue offspring. So that means what? That means all of the organisms going to die. So that means that there is no organisms to carry on the line. Does that make sense, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Tamari, you have a question?
Yes. So if two in the parents blue,
If what?
right? If both parents blue,
Uh-huh.
right? And it have a possibility that they could make a other color child because of like how they have dominant genes and like less dominant.
Right, yeah. We can explain that a little bit later on. Most likely next week we'll go into that. But as we saw here, look, the parents were blue, right? The parents were blue, and they did produce many different colors of offspring. So they produced a red one, a blue one, a green one, a purple one, and a black one. So they did produce different colors of offspring. You see that?
Yeah.
So because of sexual reproduction, and we can see that a little later on, we do produce sexual reproduction allows for this variation happen. This here, what we see in here, guys, this literal thing here that we're showing, this is the variation. Everybody seeing that, right?
Yes, sir.
Nice. So let me go again. The last point now that we're looking at. The problem with sexual reproduction now is that the process is slow. And why is the process slow? Because of course, if you have to reproduce sexually, you need to find the mate. And if you have to find the mate, that might take a little while, especially choosing the correct mate, right? It takes me about 30 something years, or 30 years. A mate has to be found in animals, right? Gametes have to be produced. Fertilization has to occur, and the embryo has to develop. All these things need to happen. So this results in a slow increase in the number of organisms in the population. right? So the increase is very slow. So the variation or the population increases very slowly. So quickly take this down. Go ahead and take this down. Is anyone confused or has any questions, students? All right, go ahead and take this down. All right, guys, you need to let me know when you all are finished, right? I don't know how fast some of you write, so please let me know when you all are finished. If you all have any questions or you want to give my next example of variation or sexual reproduction or asexual reproduction, feel free.
Yes, sir.
Finish.
All right, guys, anyone still writing? Please raise your hand. Students, anyone still writing? Raise your hand, please. All right, nobody still writing? Okay, good.
Yes,
So we understand now what asexual reproduction allows when it comes to variation. It allows no variation. What sexual reproduction allows, it allows variation to happen. And what are the advantages and disadvantages that come from that? Right? Anybody want me to go into more detail or anything regarding that? Nobody didn't ask any question before, but I'm not sure. I always have to ask. Right? So we're gonna look now at the different types of variation that we see, right? Well, of course, the importance of variation. Some of the importances we're seeing just now, right? So the importances of variation. So variation is important because, firstly, as we see here, it enables the species to adapt to changing environments, improving their chances of survival. We took a note on that a little earlier, right? It provides the raw material on which natural selection works and is therefore essential for the species to remain well adapted to the environment or to gradually change and improve by becoming better adapted to the environment. Yeah? It makes it likely that any adverse changes in environmental conditions will wipe out an entire species, since some organisms may be better adapted to new conditions. So very seldom you might see all the organisms that reproduce sexually get wiped out. And that is because there will always be one or two that have an adaptation that allows them to survive in the environment. Does that make sense, everyone?
Yes, sir.
So now hear the thing, right? So quickly go ahead and take this down. Take this down. So we didn't do any specific animal examples to variation, right? Anybody could give me any examples of how variation or this variation allows the species to adapt, right? Or be better adapted? Anybody want to tell me? Any specific examples they might have? Nobody? Nah, man. All you know, all I have examples. I just don't want to see. Let me hear. I'm not hearing anybody. I really need me to call people name. Leah. Leah, do you have an example?
So, what about polar bears or snakes? Like how they could quickly adapt to different changing weather conditions. That is one.
Yeah. You said polar bears or what?
Snakes, like how some snakes could hibernate. Like sometimes one could like hibernate during the winter or something like that.
That is actually something, yeah. That's something that hibernation is an adaptation that allows organisms to survive when conditions are not ideal, right? So hibernation would allow these organisms, if conditions are bad, they go and basically sleep it off, right? And they're able to survive. Okay. I have another example. I have an example here. When you all finish with this one, I have an example that I want to show. So let me give a little background first. So there is a type of moth, right? And this moth has two variations, right? Let me know when you all are finished. One of the variations that it has, right, is called the peppered moth. One of the variation that it has is that it could be black and white, right? Or peppered, you know, black and white, salt and pepper. It could be peppered, or it could be, it could be more black than white, right? Be much darker. So on trees, you all ever see a moss that is happen on trees, a kind of black and white kind of moss? They called lichens, lichens. You all ever see the black and white moss, students?
No, sir.
No? All right. Let me know when you all are finished. Take it writing on this and I will put up the picture.
Finished, sir.
So guys, if you all didn't realize by now, when I ask students if they are finished and ready to move on is when the second person or third person says they're finished. So when one person says alone, I wait for the second person. Or third person if you notice extra long.
Finish, sir.
Anyone still writing? All right, Alex, let me know when you're finished writing, all right? All right, Alex, you finished writing?
Yes, sir.
So let's take a look at this diagram here. So this diagram shows a moth in the picture, right? You'll tell me if you're seeing the two moths. There are two here. It have two here. Let's see in it.
Sir.
Yes, sir.
Right. So look, one is of course this moth here, and the other one is this one here. If you all weren't seeing it, right? Everybody's seeing it now. So these moths were native to Britain or England, And these moths used to camouflage. They used to hide on a tree. Now, the tree had this kind of moss on it. You all seen the moss that the tree has on it? A kind of black and white kind of moss. Everybody seeing it? So,
Yes.
which one of these moths are the one that is camouflaging best? Which one is camouflaging the best?
Black and white, sir.
The black and white one, right? The black and white one is the one that is looking like it has the best camouflage there. Well, okay, these are the two variations of moths that we saw in the environment, right? The peppered moths. And so the black one was a mutation and it used to come up ever so often, right? The peppered moth was the normal one and used to be 90%. Right? Sorry, yeah. Right. It used to be, the population used to be 90% this black and white moth, and only 10% this black moth alone. In England, the Industrial Revolution happened. And when the industry started coming in, right, it produced a lot of soot. You all know what soot is? Soot is like smoke, black smoke. And that black smoke began to coat the trees around the area, right? So the black soot began to coat the trees. And look what happens now. So you all see, look, the tree has a black soot covering all over it, right? So which one of these moths would be the one to show up in the population, sorry, to show up to the predators now? Which one gonna show up more now?
Black and white.
The black and white one going to show up more. So when the bird sees the black and white moth, right, this is what a bird looks like in my mind. When the bird sees the black and white moth, this is the moth this is the one that it is going to see. It may not see this one because it is much better camouflaged. So it is going to eat this peppered moth, right? It's going to eat the peppered one. So that means that this one is much more camouflaged. So over time, the bird started eating this one, and this one started being the one that survived. And that means that over time, this moth, the black one, ended up being the one that was 90% of the population, and the white one, or the peppered one, ended up being the one that was the lower amount, because this one was camouflaged. So you all see, you see now how variation allowed the species to survive. Everybody seeing that?
Yes, sir.
Is anyone confused, students?
No, sir.
Anybody have any questions or anything that they don't understand or they want me to explain or describe in more detail? All right, so let's take a note. Let's take a note on this, right? Let me just see if I get a better note for this specific example. So I think there is a better one. So the peppered moth. So I want you all to take this down, and that will be it for today's class. So let's read. So the peppered moth lives in Britain and is eaten by birds. Before the Industrial Revolution, the moths were black and white speckled and were well camouflaged against the pale, lichen-covered tree trunks on which they nested. During the Industrial Revolution, a melanic or all-black variety appeared in the industrial area around Manchester. This melanic variety arose as a result of a dominant mutation and was well camouflaged against the tree trunks. which were blackened with soot. This gave the melanic variety a selective advantage in industrial areas, and over time, it became far more numerous in these areas than the speckled variety. Right? So this is an example of how variation allows the organism to survive, right? Is anyone confused, students? Anybody have any questions?
Yes, sir.
All right, quickly take this note down, and that will be it for today's class. When you all are finished taking it down, you all could leave. All right. Have a good afternoon. If it is students that you will still have to gain access to the website, right, please send a message to myself or the admin, and we will enroll you so you can get access to the website. All right. Some of you all joined with using the link alone. So please go ahead, take this down, and that will be it for class. I hope you all enjoyed class. All right. And I'll see you again next week.